Hello again, friends! And since you are our friends, I hope you're indoors right now. And welcome back to another edition of Jim Cornette's Drive-Thru.
Oh, wait a minute. What do you think? They're listening to this under a tree? What do you
know? You see these millennials at spring break running around on the beach? It's crazy out there.
Well, natural selection will take over on that one. Oh, there's a national epidemic and you don't know who's got this horrible disease. Let's go fucking maul all over each other on the fucking beach. I was never that stupid when I was that age.
There was never a virus like this around when you were that age.
Well, no, I just mean just the general stupidity of that age group of people these days. Just they're either the people doing the stupid shit on video trying to get played on ridiculousness, or they're out there fucking making videos of themselves licking toilet seats and other fucking horrible things, whether there's a virus or not. And then people actually fucking watch these people lick toilet seats.
If only there was video.
This is the crowd. This is the age group that actually pays money and doesn't riot when a wrestling promotion puts on an Invisible Man match. That's the age group.
If only there was video of you at that age riding around with the Dream Machine.
Well, we had fun.
I'm sure he did.
And didn't do well. He was having more fun than I was because I was driving, but we didn't do anything stupid. Not on purpose. I will caveat that. That'll be caveated. We didn't do stupid shit on purpose. And if we did stupid shit, we tried to make sure that we were doing it at a time when people wouldn't see us do it.
Who was it from, let's say, the Memphis and Mid-South years of Jim Cornette? Because I know some of the guys that you rode around with, Buddy Landell, for instance. Who was it that you'd have to be afraid of doing really stupid shit if you were in the car with him?
You just mentioned his name. I mean, I'm not trying to malign Buddy. Buddy was noted as being the most distracted driver that has ever been behind a wheel. And just fucking, and not only distracted, but when he was paying attention to driving, he was dangerous. Because then he was aggressive and or drove too fast and or wanted people to get out of his way or whatever the fuck. But we started in Mid-South rotating rides. I would drive one day, Bobby drive another day, Dennis drive another day, and Buddy was in the group with us at first because we'd all come down together. He would drive another day. And I don't think we made it to the last Stampedes where I had to fucking bow out because I said, Buddy, I can't ride with you anymore. I said, something's going to happen. And I swear to God. So because the boys still kept riding with him at that point because it was like, well, fuck, we're not going to let him just ride with us all the time. We all rotated cars, right? That way you put an equal amount of mileage and everybody paid trans evenly and everything. But on Buddy's turn, a couple weeks, I drove myself. And it wasn't 2 fucking weeks until we're sitting in, where the fuck was it? This wasn't the big one. This was the first one. I can't remember what the town was, but Grizzly Smith came in and said, well, Cornette, your boys are going to be late. I said, why? He said, well, Dundee just got here. Dundee and Carl Fergie were driving down the road. And they look over in a fucking off the side of the road in a mud field, and there's Buddy and his fucking pride and joy fucking late model white sporty Lincoln that was a 2-door, wasn't even a 4-door. You had to fucking cram in the back seat, but 2-door white Lincoln in a mud field, and there was Buddy and Dennis and Bobby standing there knee deep in mud. He had somehow done something, not paying attention. And when he would talk to you while he was driving, he would look at you, right? So one of those things, they'd run off the road. So Dundee pulls over and yells down at him and said, hey, you need help? Yeah, and they start slogging up the fucking hill like they're going to get in the car. No, you ain't going to, because they're covered in mud. You ain't getting in our car. Dundee and Carl went down the road to the next stop where they could find a payphone. And they called back to Buddy's house and talked to his wife, Donna, and she brought the other car over because they hadn't got that far from Alexandria. And so at that point, that's when Bobby and Dennis said, well, maybe we'll just start rotating just the three of us. And then it was a week or two later that Buddy ran into Butch Reed while they were going to Biloxi when they were headed through Bunkie, Louisiana. I've told that story. He ran into the back of him.
That's where his eye popped out?
No, his eye didn't pop out. Now,
That's what I had always heard.
No, who'd you hear that from?
Buddy Landell. Actually.
No, okay, what happened was, now I've teased the new audience. Instead of having to search through YouTube, although I recommend it in these times of quarantine and strife. So we're in fucking Biloxi, Mississippi, at the Mississippi Gulf Coast Coliseum, and Dundee's the booker. He comes in the heel locker room. He says, well, Butch and Budbro ain't going to be here. I said, why not? They had an accident. Who'd they hit? It's each other. Somewhere, because Butch lived in Baton Rouge, and he had a car up somewhere, so he and Buddy were following each other down to Biloxi. Well, they're going through downtown Bunkie, Louisiana on that state road, because there was no north-south interstates. And it's a stop-and-go little small town in Louisiana. And usually when Buddy would go through one of these towns, he would be brushing his hair like Flair and looking out the window and whistling and yelling at all the girls, right? So Butch is in front. Well, Butch is driving while trying to reach down to operate the apparatus to inhale a substance through his nose. And he don't notice this old woman that pulls out in front of him and then stops suddenly at the red light, and he runs into the back of her. Well, Buddy is fucking, obviously, because it's downtown, he's brushing his hair, his blonde hair like Flair, and looking out the window and yelling at the girls when Butch comes to a halt in front of him and he don't see it, and he runs in the back of fucking Butch. Well, Buddy's head hits the steering wheel and it busts him open. It didn't pop his eyeball out, but it busted his head open and he's bleeding. But Butch, from the boom in the front that he wasn't ready for, and then the boom in the back, all of his supply of inhalant has been poured all over his fucking lap, right? In the car.
Oh no.
And it's a lot of money that he's got tied up in this. So he's fucking down in the goddamn floorboard trying to scrape up as much as he can of this substance. And Buddy is dazed and bleeding like he's juiced in a match, and he staggers up and he sees that now the worst thing, not that they've hit this fucking senior citizen in front of them, not that they've fucked up both their cars, but he has caused Butch to spill his shit. And so he leans over and he's trying to help Butch somehow fucking, I don't know how they were doing it, but they were trying to, with their hands or whatever, scrape this into a little pile where they could pinch it up or whatever. And now Butch looks up at Buddy and said, Buddy, would you get back? You're bleeding all over my shit. Because now the shit's bloody. And it made it harder to fucking scrape up into a little pile. So they missed the show that night because they hit each other. They ran into each other. That's why we didn't drive. We would let Buddy ride with us, but we didn't drive with him after that.
Small example of why Buddy led Mid-South Wrestling in fines in 1984.
That was one of the reasons.
If not set the all-time record for fines.
I think he did that too. He did that too. But anyway, but this is a show that you were, I said right before we went on the air, I'm just following you. So continue on. You botched the open and we got off on that.
You interrupted me, but I am your host, the great Brian Last, and I'll be reading your questions, which are sent in via email to CornyDriveThru@gmail.com or on Twitter using the hashtag CornyDriveThru. To this man, Mr. Jim Cornette, the exalted one, Mr. Jim Cornette.
Wait a minute now. I certainly have to rate higher than the exalted one. Are you trying to tell me that I'm a former mid-card WWE talent that has recently debuted to very little fanfare in another organization?
Well, A, he was quite well regarded on the indie scene, and B, they did tease it a few times with a tennis racket and glasses that perhaps you were the exalted one, or perhaps Brody
and that's
Lee
another reason
taking up tennis.
That's another reason why it was a letdown. When you tease a huge star and then you deliver a half a star, you're half a star behind. Do you think, Brian Last, that it is mere coincidence that I announce my retirement from professional wrestling because it's so, at this point, hard for me to bring myself to actually lend my credibility to one of these promotions that either books the Invisible Man or hires the Mud Show goofs or whatever. But I announced my retirement from wrestling, and just mere weeks later, every wrestling event in America is shut down. Coincidence? I think not.
Not sure. We should check with the Exalted One. I'm sure he has answers.
They should have called him the Grand Poobah.
You say it was a letdown having it be the former Luke Harper, but on the other hand, if it had been Matt Hardy or someone who is a bigger star, wouldn't it have been a waste of them to have them associated with the Dork Order?
Well, yeah. Do you not listen to our own programs that we do? That's what I said Thursday on the, actually not Thursday, Saturday. We usually record it Thursday.
So
we recorded it Friday. It aired Saturday. It would have been a letdown because they would have drugged Matt Hardy down with them. First of all, you cancel that entire fucking angle. And then you said about, because I didn't say the guy wasn't a talent. I said the way he's been used over the past however long he's been on television since they've been beating the piss out of him. He's not exactly the hottest he's ever been or the hottest star in the world. So you take that guy and you start giving him a push instead of making him suddenly the leader of this goddamn band of misfits that is got go-away heat. And every time they're on the card, the people bring back the tickets they bought for the last show for a refund. That's what you do. You take the guy that has talent and you try to rehabilitate his image with a new look. And as Jimmy Hart used to say, paint up, clean up, fix up, fresh new look. And concentrate on him instead of making him the leader of a bunch of fucking morons that if anybody wanted to be a star in anything, they wouldn't associate with.
Well, let's look on the bright side. Maybe this means Evil Uno won't get on the mic anymore.
Well, there could be some bright side to that. Somebody said, well, what should you do with somebody that gives Evil Uno a microphone? I say sentence him 3 to 5 years in a state penitentiary for noise pollution.
Let's look at this with some kayfabe goggles on. Are we now to assume that those vignette videos that have been playing for months, join the Dark Order, all this, were they funded? Were they financed by Brody Lee?
I don't know what his financial situation is.
Where does the Dark Order money come from? That's the big question. In kayfabe, well, they've been doing these glossy videos. Who's paying for these videos?
Tony Khan.
No, not in kayfabe.
Well, maybe it is Tony Khan. He's the richest one there. Maybe Tony Khan is secretly going to turn heel and become a member of the Dark Order.
I hope not. You know what? Give
the
Tony
whole
Khan
thing
credit.
Doesn't make any sense.
I give Tony Khan credit. He is a promoter who has not made himself an on-air character right now. I give him credit for that.
Then that's a good thing. And hopefully we will maintain that. But anyway, you were introducing this program.
This fine program.
And you introduced me, but you didn't tell the people what we do here.
I did that right before I introduced you. It sounds like you're not listening to our own programs. I wasn't listening to you. Well, but this is a wonderful break.
Then fuck it. Everybody knows anyway why we're here.
That's right.
We're here to entertain people in the times that they're locked up in their homes, practicing safe living or whatever. It used to be safe sex. Now it's just safe living. What about sex? This is going to put the fucking kibosh on sex if you can't exchange bodily fluids by shaking hands.
You know, I am so thankful I'm not single right now. I said that to Suzanne the other day. What are all the single people doing?
Well, what the fuck? What are all the married people doing? They don't have sex anyway. Now there's no way for married people to have sex.
You know, this is a wonderful break for me. My kids have been marathoning Frozen and Frozen 2 downstairs over and over and over again. So being able to record this show gets me away from downstairs.
It's frozen down there.
It's Frozen. You know about Frozen, the big Disney franchise? That
I don't care. No.
By the way, speaking of frozen things, you know, you and I don't always agree on everything. And I always respect your opinion and your take and where you're coming from, except when you go too far, which happens every now and then. And it happened just this past week on The Experience. Your views on ice cream.
What?
Were deeply disturbing to me.
Deeply disturbing.
And seemingly the entire audience. I have heard almost no one agree with you and your weird take on ice cream.
I didn't have a weird take. I didn't even say anything about ice cream. It was the cone.
It was anything crunchy with ice cream.
Well, that's not a view on ice cream. That's a view on shit you shouldn't put on ice cream. You shouldn't put crunchy shit on ice cream, the sprinkles or whatever. If I don't want crunchy.
You're against toppings?
I'm not against topping. You, as I said, you have marshmallows, you have hot fudge, you have strawberry topping, you have chocolate syrup, you have a wide variety. Did
M&Ms?
I mention whipped cream? No, that's crunchy. You shouldn't put crunchy on you. And the cone. You said, what about the cone? I mentioned that when I was a kid, I never eat the cone. I've never eaten a cone, but when I was a kid, I didn't know you were supposed to eat the cone. I thought that was the fucking apparatus that held the ice cream up. So I would eat the ice cream off the cone and stick my tongue in and get as much ice cream out of I always thought that they should give you a spoon with a cone, because how else are you supposed to get the rest of the ice cream out of the cone? Because you obviously shouldn't eat the cone. That's what you've had your hand on, your dirty old hand. And also it's crunchy. I didn't know you were supposed to eat the cone when I was a kid. I always just thought it was an ice cream waste to have that ice cream down in there. So I would get a spoon from somewhere and get the rest of the ice cream.
You've never eaten a cone? Never?
Never. No.
Have you ever taken a bite out of it?
A couple of times when I found out that you're supposed to eat it, and it's a tasteless, it's like eating roofing tile.
No, it's not. And there are different types of cones, obviously. There's waffle cones, there's whatever they call them, the cake cups. There's all sorts of different kinds of
what you need cones. Is a cup or a bowl for your ice cream. If you don't eat it right out of the package, you need a cup or a bowl. And that way you can get all the last drop of goodness of the ice cream with your spoon or without having all this stuff. But let me ask you this. Do you microwave your ice cream?
No. Do you?
What? Of course.
What do you mean, of course?
Well,
you don't microwave ice cream? You microwave it.
When you get a brand new thing of ice cream and it's just come out of the freezer and you pop the top on it, the carton, a quart of ice cream or whatever, it's as solid as a brick. It's as hard as a rock. And the full flavor, especially my favorite is strawberry. I love strawberry ice cream. But whatever ice cream you like, it's hard as a rock and the flavor it's just like eating like an icy. So what you do is you take the quart of ice cream and you put it in a microwave, about 20 or 30 seconds, depending on the power of your microwave. And when you bring it out, then the spoon goes into it smoothly and you can taste the fresh strawberry deliciousness or whatever flavor that your ice cream is. And then if you're eating it out of the container, you eat around the edges because that's where it melts first, and that's where it's nice and creamy and soft and good and delicious. And you eat around the edges and wait for the middle to follow suit and soften up as much as the edges have. And then you eat the middle, the top off the middle, and then you go around the edges a little bit. And that way you always have the creamiest, smoothest, tastiest ice cream.
I don't even know what to say to you at this point. So you've never had like a chocolate bonnet?
A what?
It's an ice cream cone, and Carvel or wherever you go,
they dip the ice cream in fudge. Sounds like a dirty Sanchez to me.
They dip the ice cream in fudge, and then they freeze it, so you have like a fudge shield on top of the ice cream.
Well, that's like that's like a Klondike bar, a chocolate-covered ice cream thing. Well, that's good, but only if you let it sit for a little while where it thaws out some, so that the ice cream but that the chocolate is not really crunchy. It might crackle when you bite into it, but then it melts quickly in your mouth. You're still not crunching.
Last time you mentioned you like whipped cream with ice cream. What about Cool Whip?
Cool Whip? Cool Whip? I'm not as big a fan of the Cool Whip as I am of the whipped cream that it comes in the can that you can spray. But the Cool Whip is okay.
What is this? It sounds like Rene Goulet saying it. What is this?
Whip. Is it I forgot you don't watch Family Guy. Why are you saying it like that? White or whip? But it's a whole thing. You don't watch Family Guy. No, you're not up on pop culture.
I don't. You know, it's beyond the cone. It's not having any, like, cookies and cream is the greatest ice cream there is.
You're back to ice cream now.
I can't get past this. And by the way, I love that you love pizza with all sorts of shitty toppings, but ice cream with toppings that make it even more delicious, a wonderful experience for your dessert needs. This you have a problem with.
No, I've already said to you that I'm in favor of toppings.
Except sprinkles or M&Ms.
Except crunchy shit, which doesn't belong on creamy ice cream.
All right, where do we go from here?
I'll tell you, I've got an email real quick, okay. A response to something that we talked about on, I believe, The Experience. Didn't we tell the story about Ronnie Garvin's plane on The Experience?
I think it may have been the Drive-Thru.
Or was it the Drive-Thru last week?
Well, that was the question about Rene Dupree, and somehow it went into Ronnie Garvin and Barry Windham flying the plane, yeah.
Well, why wouldn't it? Okay, well, then that makes sense because he sent me this email on Wednesday, and The Experience wasn't out yet. But Mason Krieger, a fine member of the cult of Cornette, he's in the armed forces, and he flies planes. He has been. Now, thankfully, he's been returned to West Virginia to lead a normal life, but you see the pictures on Twitter. He's got the official burger towel in Iceland and Antarctica and all these places that they fly these planes. So he's a plane expert's what he is.
A hero.
A hero and a plane expert. And Mason says, Dear Jim, I just heard the Ronnie Garvin story about his single-engine plane. As an aircraft mechanic, I understand that parts do break and fail on all planes, but doing proper inspections and maintenance highly reduces failures. I agree with you, Mason. That's one of the reasons I didn't want to ride in these fucking off-brand single-engine planes with these wrestlers. But anyway, I'm shocked that he and his mechanic let that problem go. As I mentioned, I don't know whether Ronnie had a mechanic. It was the fucking farmer with the pickup truck that he was jumping the plane with the jumper cables. But anyway, Mason goes on to say, not only do most single-engine planes only have an alternator and battery as your sole power source, they also do not have many redundant safety systems that many multi-engine aircraft have. As an aircraft mechanic, I take a great deal of pride in my craft. I definitely would like to shame not only Ronnie Garvin, well, at least you're shaming him from afar, because he might stretch you and put your own finger in your nose and make you pick it like he used to do those job guys on TBS. But anyway, I'd like to shame not only Ronnie Garvin on his subpar pre-flight inspection, but also that shade tree aircraft mechanic who probably pencil whipped his inspections for the man with the hands of stone. So fuck that mechanic for letting Ronnie Garvin fly and have the potential to go up like the Challenger for real. Your cult fan and fuck shitty mechanics, Mason Krieger. You know, I'm surprised, guys, the only way that wrestlers in the 60s and 70s and into the 80s used to die was in car accidents. Right? Because that's where you were. That's how you traveled almost exclusively, was in the car, and nobody was doing enough steroids or stupid drugs, almost that you would die from it. Right? So it was a shock when anybody ever died in the wrestling business in any way other than a car wreck. But I can't believe that I'm not just talking about Ronnie. And by the way, Jimmy Garvin now apparently has been a professional pilot for ages and ages and eons. And I don't think he had the fearlessness of Ronnie. But a lot of the guys over the years used to either get pilot's licenses or fly in single engine planes that they would rent or charter to get to these shows. That's how Flair went down in 75 in Wilmington. They had found, some of the Charlotte guys had found that former Air Force pilot, Willie Farkas, right? And thought, oh, he can fly us and save us all this money and everything. And come to find out, he had blown his credentials up and ended up running out of gas on the way to Wilmington. And there you go. I can't believe it didn't happen more often, just from talk about regulations these days. There was no regulations on shit like that back then. And guys just would fly. Remember Sam Menaker got a pilot's license, and when he gave notice, and Stu Hart had a plane, when Sam Menaker gave notice in Calgary when he was the booker and announcer one time, he did by borrowing Stu's plane and flying it to fucking San Antonio because he went to work for Joe Blanchard. And just so happened Blanchard was a flyer and had a plane also. And when Menaker left that territory, I think that's when he took Stu's plane back to him. That old story. I can't believe that more shit didn't happen.
Yeah, Lester Welch flying all those guys to the Bahamas back and forth.
Oh my God. And Ron's told you some stories about that. Well, Lester?
Ron
Is this
Wright.
gonna be okay? Ron Wright was flying up through the fucking Eastern Kentucky mountains, landing literally in fucking farmers' cow pastures. Anyway, speaking of cow pastures, that's a great segue for some of the things that happened on. We usually do the reviews on the experience, but this past week, 2 milestone events happened in the WWE. We said we weren't going to watch SmackDown anymore, and we didn't, but we watched part of it. And we already quit watching Raw, and we didn't watch that, but we watched part of it. The re-debut of Stone Cold Steve Austin, the return, and the debut of apparently noted football player and a guy who makes Shane McMahon look like Nureyev on his entrance, Ron Gronkowski, who is going to be the host of WrestleMania. And this guy... You made me watch these things. I didn't want to do it. You made me watch them. And all the time you knew it, that I would really fucking hate it. What the fuck is... should we talk about the good stuff first?
Was there any good stuff out of the 2 clips I sent you?
Well, I got a kick out of Austin being there, at least. Of course, now this was a YouTube officially authorized WWE YouTube clip. It looks like they cut out some dead spots. But I mean, because Austin is just Austin, and he's comfortable with being Austin, and he's a star, and it wasn't so obvious that this was hokey. He came out with just enough swagger. He looks like somebody. It wasn't awkward. He had fun with drinking the beer. He was speaking to the camera and having fun with the empty building. I don't know why they couldn't have given him a little bit better material if they wanted him to read off a list of things about 316 Day, because if you sat down for about 10 minutes, you could have come up with more interesting 316 things. But he was a star and an icon doing a rare appearance. So you wanted to listen to it. You wanted to like it. It's like the stomp in the mud hole spot. As I tell a lot of young wrestlers, go back and look at that. If it ain't Steve Austin, if it's Joe Smith doing it, it looks like shit. But he got by with it because he was fucking over like God. So it's a star and an icon, and you don't see him on TV. And plus, Steve's look never has to change. He don't have to worry about getting gray because he's bald-headed. He looks the same as he always does. He doesn't disappoint when he comes out. It's not like, oh, look at poor old Steve now. It's there's Steve Austin. So they had some goodwill built in going into this thing. I have never seen the announcer, Byron Saxton, correct?
That is correct.
I've never seen him do anything besides announce. I've basically heard him. And he was trying. I assume he's a heel. I watched Raw, but I tuned so many of the announcers out that I don't, but I assume he's a heel.
I don't know about that. I don't think he is.
Okay, then I was hoping he was the heel announcer that was finally getting his comeuppance, and that's why he was being a smartass and joining in on this, because that would make sense. But that's not the case?
I don't think it's the case. None of this made sense. This is you bringing Whitey Caldwell to Smoky Mountain Wrestling and having him do bad comedy. Who says we're going to have Steve Austin return on TV? Let's write some really bad comedy for him.
Well, I don't think they wrote it bad on purpose. I think it just turned out that way. It was just, as Jessica Rabbit said, she's not really bad. She's just drawn that way. But anyway, and Steve got more out of it than most people could when he finally confronted the guy and said, okay, let's drink some beer, blah, blah, blah. And then he kicked him right in the point of the dick for the stunt. Right in I don't know if he got beer in his eyes from the lean back or whatever. But he square with the point of his toe if you'd have drawn a zero the size of a golf ball right on the head of the guy's dick in his pants there, he couldn't have hit it any better. And he kicked him in the dick and gave him a stunner. And then here comes Becky Lynch, and they drank some beer, which was smart because the beard, that's great. They're giving Becky Lynch a rub. So maybe it's just because the two things that I watched were Austin and then followed by Ron Gronkowski, that Austin looked good by comparison. But at least he looks like he's gotten in a ring before. He came out like a man. He didn't act like an idiot. He didn't embarrass himself.
But it's a waste of Steve Austin. And I understand you don't have your regular show there. It's in an empty arena. But you flew him across the country to be there. And then you give him note cards with bad ideas for how to celebrate 316 Day going forward. And if that's not bad enough, then you say, how about we have...
And I think after the second card, he knew that it was dying, even though there was no audience, and just tried to get it over with as quickly as possible.
How about when he didn't realize the card he had been reading from was upside down, and he started talking gibberish?
No, he did that on purpose.
I know. Who says... This was like Beverly Hills Cop 3. Who says, let's bring this guy in and have him do bad comedy? The most serious... ass-kicking star we've ever had, the guy who made it so the company can go public. He blew the company up. Let's bring him in and have him do the same crap we have everyone else do every single week, which has caused millions and millions of fans to say, I could do something else with my Monday nights. Let's have him do that. Because even if you get past the note cards...
That would be Vince, apparently.
That would be Vince and his wonderful crew of writers.
I wonder if Steve said, well, fuck it, I'll just do this because I've risked virus to fly all the way out of here.
And if that wasn't bad enough, then you have Byron Saxton all of a sudden rating him like he's a gymnast for the material that was written for him by Vince's amazing crew of writers.
How did he have the scorecards already done that quickly?
I've only been watching Raw lately as long as you have. I've never seen him do this on Raw. I've never seen him do this. I've never seen anyone talk about this. So I don't think this is like a regular recurring feature of the Byron Saxton character that he just grades people. If it is, I don't know about it. But why did he have those cards there? Why was he so happy doing this? Why was the camera fixed on him as soon as he stood up to do the hell yeah? There are a million different ways they could have done something better with Steve Austin. Steve Austin! Jim Londos, Lou Thez, Ric Flair, Hulk Hogan, Steve Austin.
Jackie Fargo, for heaven's sake. I got nothing. But at least he looked better than Ron Gronkowski.
Rob Gronkowski.
Does it matter at this point?
Well, what did you think of the debut of Rob Gronkowski on SmackDown?
This guy is a big star football player, right? I know nothing about football. I've heard his name as, in passing. I don't seek out any knowledge of any football players. This guy's a big star.
He was a big star. He retired, I think, a couple seasons back. He was a big star with the New England Patriots, who have obviously won many, many championships in the NFL. And he's been a wrestling fan that's been talked about for years. I can
tell that. He got in the ring just like a wrestling fan that was getting in the ring on fucking Raw.
He's appeared on wrestling before, but now I believe he has signed a contract and obviously hosting WrestleMania.
And apparently, is he supposed to be a goof, or did they just make him a goof for this?
I was watching this and thinking, is this his decision to come out and start dancing to an audience that isn't there?
But was that dancing or was it epileptic seizures? Was it convulsions? Was it twerking? He humped the ring post, for God's sake. That's why I said I was going to say he made Shane McMahon look like a cross between Fred Astaire and Ginger Rogers. I figured that was too old a reference for the room. Are there any talented dancers these days? Who's the most famous dancer in the world right now?
I actually don't know. Maybe someone on that
Well, there you go.
What is the dancing show? Celebrities Dancing.
Dancing with the Stars.
Dancing with the Stars.
That was hard.
I don't watch
What's that show where they dance with the stars? What's it called?
Well, I don't watch it. I'm assuming one of those dancers is probably the most famous dancer in the world right now.
Well, apparently there ain't a lot of famous dancers anymore, so we're going to have to go back. And Ron Gronkowski is not one of them. What the fuck? He came out like a goof. he recited a memorized statement. I'm happy that he was a fan when he was young and etc. But that's what it looked like, another instance of a fan that won a contest to come get in the ring on Raw. And then for whatever reason, that Mojo Rawley, I was going to say the same thing about him, but he apparently actually is alleged to be a wrestler. And he's the friend of Ron Gronkowski's that set this whole thing up. So they ought to fire him immediately. But he and Mojo Rawley assaulted Michael Cole for whatever fucking reason, and not beating him up, but fucking grabbing his ass or whatever.
He seemed like he was having a ball, Michael Cole.
Yeah, well, because he's a football fan. See, that's every time, whether it was that, who was the goddamn Pac-Man Jones, the football player in TNA?
Oh, God, yeah.
The boys were just over the moon that Pac-Man Jones was going to come and be a part of their show. And after they explained to me who the fuck he was, I said, wait a minute. So a disgraced football player that is not allowed to play football is going to be a big addition to our fucking program. And then that fucking guy, he came with his entourage, which was a bunch of fucking grown adult men dressed like John Cena's worst nightmare, with fucking chains around their neck and the floppy fucking shoes and the baggy shorts and the backwards caps. And I'm not being racial when I say that, because it was a mixture of white and black people that all looked like they were dressed like a goddamn of an explosion in a Salvation Army drop box after the rappers had dropped off all their goddamn hand-me-downs.
How big was the entourage?
Oh, he must have brought 8, 10, 12 guys with him. Pac-Man Jones, who was like he was somebody, and they're just wandered around fucking whatever. But the boys are all football fans, so they mark out, to have these football players, and Lawrence Taylor. Lawrence Taylor at WrestleMania, what was that, 22 or 3 years ago, or 25 years ago?
WrestleMania 11.
Yeah. The guys were just, oh my gosh, it's Lawrence Taylor. I'm like, okay, here's the problem, guys. And that includes The Office. And Vince is obviously a football fan. He just started a football league. You put this fucking high profile fucking match on WrestleMania, a single match with a guy that's never had a fucking match before. He's a great athlete. I don't give a fuck. So, so is goddamn Olga Corbett was a great athlete. I don't know if she'd be winning any UFC competitions. It's different athletics. But they're always over the moon when they can get because all the guys are football fans. So they can get football players to come, and they think Mike Tyson was worth the money. Mike Tyson, didn't act like he was a goddamn fan that won a contest. He was so happy to fucking be there. It was his lifelong dream. He was like, yeah, I'm the baddest man in the world. Now I'm on Raw. It worked. Secondly, they didn't have him work because he wouldn't have been able to. And thirdly, he was a huge goddamn celebrity.
Well, that's the other thing. He was a worldwide star. One of the big failings with Lawrence Taylor, who, all things considered, did exceptionally well in that match with Bam Bam.
I was going to get to that. Go ahead.
But Lawrence Taylor was a Northeast star. He was a New York Giant. So he wasn't...
That's another thing.
Rob Gronkowski's a New England Patriot. He's not known throughout the world. He's known throughout the United States, but he's only a big deal to fans of the New England Patriots.
Well, and Lawrence Taylor was also, because it was New York. Bruce is from Texas. He knows better, but he wasn't going to say any different. I kept saying, Bruce, he's a big star in New York. This is a pay-per-view all across the fucking world. Oh, but New York's center of the universe, because that's what Vince thinks. And that's how everybody in the office is taught. So, Lord, but Bam Bam Bigelow, to his credit, he thought, I'm going to get a lot of publicity out of this. It's a big fucking high-profile WrestleMania match. He took the incentive to make sure, and he was one of the better workers in the company at that time, especially he was the best big man in the business at one time and still one of the better workers in the company at that time. And he made it his mission for that thing not to be embarrassing and to get as much out of Lawrence Taylor as could be got. And he did it. And I was there when they helped Lawrence Taylor to the back. As soon as he got through that goddamn the entranceway, right? And it wasn't as majestic as it was then and as it is now, and it's still on the floor. He didn't have to walk up a ramp. He got through that entranceway, and people had to physically help him to a chair. I have never seen a man as close to death as Lawrence Taylor was, and they were worried about him and calling EMTs and like, do we need to hydrate him? Does he need some water? What the fuck is he turned white, and that's not a racist remark either. He was ready to fucking pass out. I think he would have vomited if he could have got up enough energy. And he got a fucking learned a healthy dose of respect for what the guys did at that point, because here comes Bam Bam, 400 fucking pounds or whatever he was, smiling from ear to ear. Hey, that was great. And this big NFL football player is ready to be hooked up to a machine. So, but anyway, back to Ron Gronkowski.
Rob.
I swear to God, the only thing that could have made this worse was here comes Baron Corbin, who has been appointed Grand Marshal of the Possum Day Parade, with that fucking outfit and that fucking teeny tiny little head. What?
You can't escape him every time you watch now.
I know, it's like he's everywhere. And that's the most ludicrous visual I've ever seen. And with the head and the fucking face, even if he wasn't reciting lines, obviously, that somebody else has given him, he just looks so ridiculous. It just screams. It doesn't even scream underneath guy. It screams outlaw. You can't take that seriously. And then here comes Elias. And he performs some lines and he sings a song, and the two goons are in the background laughing at Baron Corbin like everybody else was, but he's still dancing. Ron Gronkowski back there in the back, he's still dancing. I swear to God, I'm not lying to you. I'm going to read you exactly what I wrote. I wrote, this is a fucking high school play. Less than 10 seconds later, they did the schoolyard push trip. Like they were 6 years old. The guy got down on his hands and knees behind Baron Corbin, and old Ron Gronkowski pushed him over backwards. I just said it's a high school play. They haven't made it that far. We used to do that in 4th grade. And then somehow Gronkowski is told before he goes out there how to say the line that he was supposed to say, which was, I'm not, running the show at WrestleMania, but I'm going to really support a match between you, which was awkward anyway or whatever. And somehow he managed to mumble mouth that. I'm going to advocate for a match between you guys at WrestleMania. Read it. Because there's nobody there.
And there's the match no one is asking for.
Yes. By absolutely no demand whatsoever, we have signed this match that's going to be embarrassing. And we signed it in an embarrassing way with our embarrassing host. Can you imagine how stinky, if this guy is the host of WrestleMania, how stinky it's going to be with no people even there? If he does have fans, they won't even be there to cheer him when he fucking sounds like an idiot.
I wish there were. I'm actually really curious how the WWE fan base will react to him dancing and acting the way he does, and him and Mojo Rawley together. It's just like spring break. It's just awful. It's like spring break on the Jersey Shore. It's awful.
I can tell you how they would have reacted at such a time when wrestling fans actually liked and respected wrestling. They'd have booed him out of the building and thrown shit at him. But with this audience, I don't know. Everything's supposed to be a fucking joke. Everything's supposed to be a fucking hoot. It's supposed to be something you laugh at, wrestling. And if you take your business seriously or attempt to take the business that you're a fan of seriously, people laugh at you for it because it has become such a joke. So I don't know now how maybe they think that, okay, a guy, dancing to the ring like he's just been tased by the fucking Parsippany, New Jersey police force is somehow entertaining. But when you think of a badass football player, couldn't this guy have come down in some kind of halfway well, I guess he doesn't really look like a badass, but some kind of serious manner and done something serious to hype WrestleMania. but what they're looking for is publicity, and if he was serious about it, ESPN wouldn't play it. But now ESPN, hey, look at this fucking goofy football player acting like an idiot, that stupid wrestling stuff. So they'll play that. And they don't mind if shit like that gets played about their company now, because everybody in decision-making power in the company was either never in the wrestling business or now no longer admits it. So they think that's good shit. I don't fucking know what to tell you.
The more WWE I see, the more I understand a portion of the AEW fan base who just want wrestling and are very excited about AEW. There's people who just love everything AEW does, and there's other people who just want to watch wrestling, and I understand it. They can't watch this crap. The presentation, the tone, the commentators, the bad comedy, playing to crowds that aren't there. It's not just about the empty arena shows. We've watched shows with arenas that were at least half filled. Not good. This is not a good television product. It's not a good wrestling product.
And of all people, AEW proved it can be done with a few people in the building and just being serious instead of trying to win. There's a reason why they added laugh tracks with all the sitcoms in the 60s. Because a joke doesn't sound like a joke if nobody laughs at it. And that's why they have to have Michael Cole laugh at it. But when it's not funny and he laughs at it, then it calls attention to the fact that it's not funny. And I'm not advocating, there's a word, for them to go out and hire funnier comedy writers. I'm actually advocating for them to fire the writers they have now and don't hire any more. And let some wrestlers, preferably ones with 20 years experience or whatever the time was that they stopped taking the wrestling business seriously, book their fucking wrestling. If you had a bunch of guys like Cesaro and Daniel Bryan did the other week, or you had some guys that, who else? There was somebody else on one of the empty WWE shows that actually did pretty good and took it halfway seriously. I can't remember now. But otherwise, you've got a bunch of people that have been trained that they are performers, trained at a performance center, and are used to doing athletic routines rather than simulating a contest. And instead of doing their own promos, they're used to being handed shit on a piece of paper and told to say exactly that. So they're fucked. They're completely fucked. And that's the fault of them not being trained any other way. They're not in the wrestling business anymore. Therefore, they're completely lost when they have to do anything other than what they've been doing. And that's why I didn't train guys the WWF way in OVW. I trained guys how to be wrestlers, because then they could adapt to do shit, but they could still do shit when they had to. Whew. Anyway, you know what? Here's an idea. I think that we should start a class action suit against the New England Patriots for letting Ron Gronkowski loose on the wrestling world. It's their fault.
There's probably a lot of other things you could sue the New England Patriots for, too, yeah.
Well, if they hadn't have let him off the team, then he wouldn't be fucking with us right now. So, if we all want to get together and we all want to put our names in the hat of a class action suit to sue the New England Patriots for not keeping this goof locked up where he should be and letting him loose on WrestleMania, I know who we can call.
Call Stephen P. News. If you need to sue. An outlaw mud show or two. He'll sue the rest.
Yes, ladies and gentlemen, if you were offended by Ron Gronkowski, if you were offended by a guy who, when he showed up for his first day of football practice, the coach held up the football and said, "Son, can you pass this?" He said, "Pass it? Hell, I don't even think I can swallow it." If you are offended that Ron Gronkowski has suddenly appeared on your television screen, or if you have been harmed or damaged in any other way by any other heartless major corporation like the WWE that doesn't put your best interest first, that seeks to, through greed and avarice, cheat you or harm you and your family or deprive you of your legal rights, you can call Stephen P. New at thenewlawoffice.com, 888-692-8084. newlawoffice.com, 888-692-8084 for your legal needs. And no, it doesn't even have to be a situation where you need to pour bleach in your eyes so that you can unsee Ron Gronkowski humping the ring post on Raw. It could be the diabetes medicine that gave people genital gangrene. It could be the weed killer or the talcum powder that gave people cancer. It could be opioid-addicted babies that are born that way because of the greed and avarice of the major pharmaceutical companies. It can be a variety of legal issues that could come down upon you and envelop you and your family in this time of trying need. As a matter of fact, class action against the coronavirus may be upcoming. Get in on the ground floor. Stephen P. New, newlawoffice.com, 888-692-8084. And I've seen Stephen P. New go to the ring, and he can get in the ring in a more smooth and coordinated manner than former NFL superstar Ron Gronkowski. He's a Renaissance man, a man of many talents.
Did he wipe his feet before he went into the ring?
He certainly, well, actually, he wiped his feet on one of the Outlaw Mud Show guys that was laying beside the ring before he got in the ring. But Stephen P. New, get even with Stephen, trademark, Stephen P. Stephen P. New will even go to court in the midst of a crisis just to make sure that Outlaw Mud Show assholes don't get anything over on him, and he won't let anybody get anything over on you, or he won't let anybody get over. Either way, he's like he could work for the WWE. He won't let anybody get over. 888-692-8084, Stephen P. New. For heaven's sake.
Well, for heaven's sake, we have a ton of questions that we have to get through this week here on the show, or get to this week on the show. I guess we'll get through them as well.
When we get to them, we'll get through them.
This has been a popular topic. I'll read this question sent in on Twitter using the hashtag CornyDriveThru from Pete Boyle. What is your take on Braun Strowman's ranting response to Evil Uno and Jon Moxley asking fans to support indie wrestlers during the pandemic? Have you followed this? You want me to read the comments?
Okay, I don't have any idea what. Remember, this has not changed my life a great deal. This social distancing thing. I've been doing that for fucking years now, or trying to. But I have had a steady schedule of things to do at home, such as fulfilling all the Cornette's collectibles at JimCornette.com. By the way, I should have mentioned earlier, but I will do that now, that you can get in on the orders while they've kept the post office open. I'm shipping twice a week, come hell, high water, or sickness. And people, the action figures are going fast. And because they come from China, we may not have any more. So get those quickly at JimCornette.com. Behind the Curtain, the graphic novels. The Cult of Cornette membership certificates, which we need in these trying times more than ever. I have a feeling if you need help and emergency services come to your door, if they see a Cult of Cornette membership certificate on the wall, they'll give you priority treatment. And also, the wrestling golds are legitimately flying because people are wanting to watch classic wrestling. 10 hours for $9 autographed. JimCornette.com. But anyway, otherwise than that, my general schedule has been unchanged. I sit here and record with you, and then I fill orders. I don't know what the fuck Braun Strowman is doing, and I haven't asked anybody. So what the fuck's he doing?
Well, here's what happened, and that question from Pete Boyle referenced Jon Moxley and Evil Uno. I believe Jon Moxley, although he didn't attach his name to it, set up a GoFundMe page to help wrestlers who aren't working. You talked about the fact that this and the cancellation of WrestleMania, or not the cancellation, but the change in what WrestleMania is, has really hurt independent wrestling promoters, anyone who was expecting not just a big payday for the WrestleMania weekend, but anyone who was expecting to work over the next several months.
Yeah.
So Jon Moxley set up, I believe, a GoFundMe, and then Evil Uno, not your favorite person, Exalted One, but he tweeted out in the wake of all these cancellations, support the independents. Be it wrestling, music, etc. Buy their merch, support them through Patreon, share their stuff. The gig economy is going to be, the gig economy is going to...
Wait, the gig economy? What is a gig economy?
I'm trying to make sense of what he wrote here. The gig economy is going to a huge hit, I guess going to take a huge hit, and many don't have the safety net necessary to survive this.
Well, that seems like a charitable thing to do.
A reasonable thing. Now, there are some of the Outlaw Mud Show wrestlers that need to be starved out of the fucking profession.
But if we can have a happy fucking coincidence and some of them can run off and bother other people and do other things, but as a whole, guys who want to be professional wrestlers and be serious about it need support at this time.
At which point, I guess, Braun Strowman decided to reply on Twitter under his real name, Adam Scherr. What do you think about wrestlers using their real names on Twitter?
Why would, for fuck's sake, why would he have his real name on his Twitter when he's Braun Strowman? Well, you know, when you think about it, he's never been in a business, has he? He's only been a WWE guy. He never worked anywhere else. So he's never actually been in the wrestling business. Right?
Correct.
So he's another one of these fucking people that just think, oh, I'm a performer playing a part. So he puts his real name on his Twitter. Okay. What'd he say? Now I already dislike the guy.
He said, "Here we go with more of the somebody pay my bills stuff. If you can't afford to pay your bills, maybe you should change professions. That's why I quit Strongman. I loved it, but I couldn't afford to live."
Wait a minute, you quit Strongman. Is Strongman even a business?
I guess Strongman competitions, like Ken Patera used to do.
Well, do they have more than like one of those a year? That was the deal. ABC's World's Strongest Man competition this year is like, it's something that never mind.
That's why I quit Strongman. I loved it, but I couldn't afford to live. So instead of making a GoFundMe or a Patreon, wanting someone else to take care of me, I went out and worked harder than I ever have in my life to get to where I am. What happened to being accountable for your own actions? For anyone that goes, it's easy for you to say you're a WWE superstar. And FYI, 7 years ago, I moved to Florida with everything I owned in a Kia Soul with $150 to my name when I started this.
Okay, well, that means that up until the time 7 years ago, you were a fucking bum. What difference does that make to anything? When you have somebody of that size and that strength, then they attract the attention of the WWE, who then pays you to basically go to school. And that's what he's one of the guys that they've done that. That's why I used to get on the guys that had contracts in OVW and harder. You got to work harder. You're being paid to go to school. He was paid to train. They trained him, and now he makes money guaranteed whether he wrestles or not because he's with the biggest company. But that doesn't, this guy probably couldn't survive 15 seconds in the actual wrestling business and probably wouldn't want to, and nobody would probably want him to. But to say that it is anybody's fault, it's not like a GoFundMe because I fucked up and did something stupid and hurt myself. People have done that, and I don't like that. Or even a GoFundMe because I'm a drunk or a fucking alcoholic or a drug addict or whatever. Help me. None of these people made these decisions to suddenly have all these bookings taken away from them. They had nothing to do with it. So how is he blaming them like that it was their fault that they got fucking fired or banished or whatever? That's ridiculous.
Work harder.
And
don't
it's
be
also
poor.
Yes, as I just illustrated, Lawrence Taylor found out. I'm sure that Braun Strowman has worked harder at wrestling than he has at anything in his life. And guess what, bucko? Used to, you would have had to work that hard and make absolutely no money at it until you got good at it and somebody noticed you, and then maybe you'd get a spot. So you should be down on your fucking knees every day thanking Vince McMahon that they paid you to train, you fucking big jack off. So and I understand the thought that they put into these guys' minds that, well, you're paying your dues here at the Performance Center. Bull fucking shit. You don't pay dues at the Performance Center. You work your ass off to athletically train, but you don't pay any dues. You don't go out and take a chance on getting stabbed by fans. You don't drive in a car 600 miles each way with a bunch of other guys. You don't fucking get screwed on a fucking payoff or goddamn make $50 because the promoter said, well, we left the back door open. A bunch of people got in free. You're not in the wrestling business. You're in a very high-tech program where they pay you to go to school. So, yes, you work hard in the Performance Center, but no, there are no dues being paid. But that's what they tell the guys because, they want them to think that they're paying dues. But no, you're not actually in the real wrestling business. Anybody that has only been in the WWE system that has come from the Performance Center, this is not knocking their talent, but they haven't ever been in the wrestling business. And so they got no ability whatsoever to tell people that are actually in the wrestling business what they should or should be doing because they've had it. They didn't get born with a silver spoon in their mouth. They got a silver spoon stuck in their mouth when somebody saw him and said, wow, he looks like we could do something with him. Let's give him $100,000 a year, $50,000 a year, whatever the fuck they're making these days to train.
Yeah, I mean, say what you want about Evil Uno and, of course, Moxley, too, but these are guys that worked the indies for years. Moxley worked the indies and
Moxley,
got a chance.
Yeah, Moxley worked the indies for years, got a chance. Evil Uno, unfortunately, worked the indies for years, and nobody ran him off, and so he finally got a chance, too. I'm saying it can go either way. You can work the indies and get a chance and suck, and you can work the indies and get a chance and have talent be rewarded. But
how many people got sent to you in OVW who had never worked anywhere that WWE scouted them, liked their look, and said, make them into a wrestler? And were they like this? Were they just living in a fantasy land?
Well, they may have had preconceived notions, but when they got to the old Davis Arena, especially, those preconceived notions went out the window. There was that Achim Albrecht that was Brackus, nice guy, German bodybuilder. Shane had met him, whatever. He had, and he didn't make it. And there was that Glenn Kulka, who was a Canadian football player, nice guy, but he didn't make it. And there was Stefan something or other, this big jacked up fucking guy that was like 6'6" and fucking 300 something pounds. I can't remember what his last name was. He didn't make it. Oh, Batista, very few.
Would you put Batista in that same bracket?
No, he had gone to AFA school just briefly, couple of months. And he didn't. I don't know. He was so fucking quiet and nondescript. I don't know what he thought he was going to go through when he came here, but at least he had seen a wrestling school before. Even Brock, not only was obviously he'd had plenty of wrestling background, just not pro wrestling, but he had worked out a bit with Brad Ringens in Minneapolis. But I'm trying to think of anybody they sent to us in OVW that had never wrestled before, had any wrestling training before, and made it. I mean, we found some guys, Elijah Burke, we found him at one of our tryout camps, but we invited him to OVW before he got a contract because he'd been a lifelong fan and he was a natural. I ended up putting a belt on him after about a year because he was a Dusty fan. He knew how to talk to people. He had a great smile and a happy face and a look, and he was athletic. He'd been a fireman. But it's hard when, especially if somebody is late 20s, 30 or whatever, they've done something beforehand, unless they've been a high level athlete in some other kind of fucking, strongman contest. That's not exactly, yes, it's a specialized business, I'm sure, but high level athlete, you don't normally think of, so it's hard for them to pick it up if they haven't had any training of any kind before. And now that all the I mean, think of how many guys they signed down there that you see that they've signed from these camps and scouting things that have no wrestling background whatsoever, but they've been a great athlete at one thing or another, or they have unnatural size or whatever, and you never hear about them again.
He was
right.
He was doing strongman competitions, and he went to Florida with only $150 to his name. So how was he paying for the gas?
That's a good question. I've told a story before. Johnny Jeter, another guy they fucked royally. He moved to Louisville from San Diego with everything he owned in the trunk of his car, a used Firebird, drove across here and got a job waiting tables at Chili's to pay for his wrestling school tuition. But he was only 19. He wasn't a grown adult man that had been competing in strongman and only had $150. It sounds to me like Braun Strowman has made a series of bad decisions in his life. I had more than $150 when I was in my late 20s because I determined that shit cost money and I should make some, even if I hadn't been in the wrestling business.
Well,
but anyway, he sounds like an asshole. But I can see where some people are coming from with the, everybody's GoFundMe. But in this case, no. This is something that was not any of these people. It's not any of our faults that we've lost all this money or all this employment or all these bookings or all this whatever over the past several weeks. It's in this country, it's only the fault of the rotten Republican administration that has fucked us again because they didn't take it seriously and weren't ready for it. But that's still not the guy's fault. So for a guy with guaranteed money to be knocking them, fuck you, you big fat fuck.
Well, he's not fat.
Well, he's a fathead then.
Okay, well, let's get away from the fathead. Our next question is another popular topic.
I bet he didn't even really turn that fucking bus over or whatever it was.
How do you get started in strongman? Like, hey, I want to get into the next competition. I've lifted a bunch of tires. I think I could do it. Like, how do you get started? I could pop this thing.
I don't have any idea. I do not know. Strongman.
Braun Strowman, the strongman.
They should have called him Braun Strowman.
Yeah, really, it's a missed opportunity.
It worked for Bullet Bob Armstrong, right? Braun Strowman.
Well, our next question.
And that's another example, but seriously, that's another example of these fucking assholes that have had all this shit given to them and don't appreciate it because they think that they've paid dues and this is the way it's supposed to be, paid to go to school. Yeah, I want to be a lawyer. Can somebody give me $200,000 so that I can go to law school and then I'll lawyer for you? Fuck you.
Our next question. A popular topic we've received many emails about, and I actually have a few of them in front of me because they all address different points of this. This first one, Jim, is from John in Cleveland. I heard Jake the Snake on a podcast called Flip the Script, and he said in his opinion, Bret and Shawn were the worst world champions, and they couldn't put asses in the seats, and they fought over Sonny's pussy. What's your take on that, Bret and Shawn as champions? And is there any truth to what Jake said? So that's one of the questions, Joe. Let me just read a couple of these here so you get the general idea. This one was sent in to CornyDriveThru@gmail.com from Thaddeus Armstrong in Washington, D.C. Jake the Snake recently appeared on Flip the Script and made claims that the Montreal Screwjob was essentially based around the fact that both guys were fighting over the pussy, talking about Sonny, and didn't want to put the other over. Now, I thought I'd heard everything till now and was wondering if you had any knowledge of this. During the same interview, he claimed Bret Hart was boring and never had the it factor, and that Shawn had the it factor, I guess, though he did put him over as a great wrestler, and that both were never credible as champions based on the believability, given that the example of see one of them against Andre the Giant.
Good fucking God.
As a guy who started watching during the Austin Rock era, I at least had a chance to witness Shawn Michaels, but only heard Bret's stories and accepted him as great. So my question is, how over was Bret? And then one last one here, Jim. Jake Roberts did an interview and was asked who the worst world champions were. To my surprise, he answered Shawn Michaels and Bret Hart. and went as far as to say that Bret was a good mechanic at best, but was a low card tag team guy, and that's what he should have always been. What are your thoughts? Do you agree, disagree? So obviously, Jake, a couple things there about where Bret and Shawn rank as champions, if they were good enough to be champions, and was Montreal all about them fighting over Sonny's pussy?
Good God. Well, one thing is, I understand Jake not liking Shawn because that would be a large club he'd be a part of, but I wonder where the heat with Bret comes from. Because when you say shit like that, obviously he's mad at both of them. I mean, we know what the story is. Shawn was the best performer as far as performing of the fucking 90s. He was just a prick to deal with and a complete asshole and always pilled up or having a problem. He was selfish and didn't want to put anybody over except for the members of his own little treehouse club called the Clique. Bret was a better technical worker than Shawn, but not as flamboyant with all the moves, but he liked it that way, but it fit his personality because he was more serious, but he was always serious about the wrestling business, in some cases too serious about himself, but always serious about the wrestling business. And Bret, you know, the thought can be that Shawn and Bret didn't draw the crowds in the 90s that Hogan did in the 80s because wrestling was hot in the 80s, which through no fault of Wrestling's own, bad management from TBS and Vince, the steroid trial, and just cracking up there the first half of the 90s, shit was down. But Jake didn't say that Kevin Nash, was the worst WWF champion of all time, because he really was, in terms of box office, the worst drawing WWF champion of all time. And he had the worst matches. And Jake himself saw the Ultimate Warrior. He was there for Warrior. And Warrior may have drawn money, but he was abysmal in every facet of fucking wrestling. So, and let's be honest again, neither Shawn nor Bret could do a promo like Jake in his day, and Jake psychologically was equal to Bret as a worker and probably ahead of Shawn psychology-wise, because Jake's shit would make more sense, but as an athlete and an in-ring performer, both Shawn and Bret in their sleep could have better athletic matches than Jake. And Jake also never got a run with the belt, not because he wasn't over at the time, but probably mostly because, besides the fact that his heyday came under Hogan and they weren't going to take the belt off of Hogan, he may be mad because he may say they trusted fucking Shawn Michaels with his goddamn belt and they didn't fucking trust me with it. How bad was I?
I watched the interview. Part of his complaint seems to be, or I don't know if complaint's the right word, that he seems to be of the mindset you have to be a big guy, that wrestlers, and especially star wrestlers, should be bigger than Shawn and Bret were.
Well, bigger. Bret could have kicked the shit out of Jake at probably any point in his fucking life unless Jake got his hands on an equalizer. So that doesn't hold water. And I agree to an extent about size. I mean, look at Marco's stunted growth. That's just ridiculous. You have to look like an athlete and you have to look like you can whip somebody. And let's face it, unfortunately, for himself, Shawn Michaels couldn't whip anybody in a real fight, as has been proven by every single fight he's ever gotten into with anybody in the business. But at least he was 6 feet tall and he was about fucking 2, or you could announce him at 215 or 220. It was acceptable, especially given the challengers or the opponents that he had at the time. Jake was never that physically fucking impressive. He's big because he got his dad's fucking height. So it's if I can even say that Shawn Michaels was a great worker in his way all around, acknowledging that he was still a fucking prick, then certainly Jake can, unless he's just mad. When you say something like that, I'd love to say Shawn Michaels was the shits, but I can't because everybody would know I was a goof if I said that. I'd be lying. And Bret was fucking very fucking good. Very fucking good. Better in the ring than Jake. Maybe not getting the most out of the least, but Jake also had help from a 15-foot fucking snake. So it's got to be personal, because you would not say that otherwise. Look at the other people that have had that belt since then. For fuck's sake. The Miz was a fucking champion.
That's a good point.
You're going to knock Bret Hart and Shawn Michaels? They put the belt on Miz.
Jake was on the creative team in 96. Did he ever raise any concerns that you remember about Shawn Michaels being the champion?
No, well, only the concerns that we all raised every time that Shawn was doing something stupid, but he was, how long was he on it? Did it last 4 months? Jake was just there to come to some meetings, get a fucking check. And I mean, he could, toss a few ideas in from left field at one time or another in the meeting, but he never came with any paperwork. He never did any homework. But no, he wasn't going to tell Vince, hey, the guy you decided to put the belt on, we ought to take the belt off of him because he's not big enough. Even if he felt like that horse had left the barn. He was smarter than to say that, but that's personal to me. It has to be. And why group Bret in that? And yes, they were fighting over Sonny's pussy, but they fought over everything else too. That wasn't the bone of contention as to why Bret wouldn't put Shawn over. That was the bone of contention as to why that Bret fucking took Shawn down and was going to beat the fuck out of him because he had made that accusation on TV before Bret had split up with his wife yet. But that was just, no, it wasn't over Sonny is why the Montreal happened. That's ridiculous. And Jake knows that, but he's just saying shit to be on a podcast.
Well.
So there you go.
There you go. Our next question, Jim, is one that we heard from a lot of different people. So let me ask you, we've talked so much about WrestleMania happening this year, 2 nights. Now we know it's going to be pre-taped. Vince McMahon did not postpone it, did not cancel it, did not move it to the summer. What do you think of Tony Khan and AEW postponing Blood and Guts?
Well, we said this last week on one of the programs. You can't have that match with no people. That would be insane. Think in an empty building, taking a guy's face and ramming it in the fucking steel cage and fucking blood spurting everywhere. And if they don't have blood and guts, they're pretty fucking stupid. You can't have a War Games style match or something that requires that level of brutality and animosity and etc. without people. And besides that, as we mentioned, they had sold more tickets. That was going to be their record crowd, or at least tied with their Chicago record or whatever in Newark for that match live. They got to go back to Newark sometime after this whole thing's over with. And those people in Newark are going to want to see the fucking Blood and Guts. So I think they should save it for that. But can you just the whole idea of staggered entrances into a cage and the heel team having the advantage and then the baby faces trying to make a comeback and etc. with no people, that doesn't work. So no, they were never going to do that. I can't believe anybody ever seriously considered doing a War Games match in an empty building, much less Cody, who would know better than anybody. And this is his daddy's baby.
Give credit where credit's due. I mean, we're only a week into this, but Tony Khan and AEW have handled this real life situation, this global crisis, a lot better than Vince McMahon has.
Well, that's because I guess they've been out in public. Bruce Pritchard, this one true thing Bruce used to say, he said Vince hadn't been to the grocery since 1984. And that's it. He doesn't go out in public anyway. He's out in public when his limo is taking him from the office to the plane. He does nothing but work. He does nothing for enjoyment. And he just refuses to admit defeat. But in this case, this has whipped even WrestleMania's ass. He won't admit it. I can't imagine what this is going to... Are we going to watch this, by the way?
Well, luckily they're breaking it up over 2 nights instead of one big 6-hour pay-per-view
Well, that's what I did the last time I watched it anyway, because I taped it and broke. But we should mention, you're setting me up in the upcoming future, as in less than 24 hours now with the WWE Network. And we are going to, in the midst of all of this, since we can't watch a lot more empty arena matches, and it's not fair to grade a lot of these people. Some of them, yes, it's fair to grade them under these circumstances. But anyway, we're going to classic events to review. We're going to more current events that I haven't seen. If I haven't seen it, it's new to me to review.
Documentaries,
different things that we can talk about to keep some programming up for the folks that are sick and shut in, as they used to say. You know, I always prayed that when I was a kid, I always hoped and prayed that more people would get sick and shut in their house, because that's the only way we got a main event on television. Do they even say that anymore for the sick and the shut-ins?
No.
Are you old enough to even remember that?
I've
no,
only heard you say it. Yeah. That's right.
Back that was a TV thing in the 50s and 60s and early 70s. You didn't get main event matches on television. You got the studio show, or you got squashes, or you got whatever, and you got tapes of main events from the arenas, but not the whole thing. But every time that they would want to do an angle that required there be a main event match book, 2 stars against each other, 2 tag teams against each other for the title or whatever, the announcer, whoever it was, I remember Harry Thornton in Chattanooga on the Chattanooga tape, was big with this. He'd say, for all you folks that are sick and shut in and can't get out to the matches in person, we're going to give you this match right here on television for free. And that was a big fucking deal. So I hope more people get sick and shut in. But anyway, we're going to be doing that. Well, on the experience, the drive-through, and on the new Patreon, there's going to be more stuff added. Not only the classic experience and drive-through shows, but we've got audio that we're going to be putting up, and we're going to be doing special shows for the Patreon coming up next month, April, where we review things and give you looks at stuff that is accessible to everybody on the network or YouTube or whatever, so we can have some more fun wrestling to talk about without watching anything involving empty arenas or the Invisible Men, because that's just giving me gas.
Well, our next question, Jim, was sent in to CornyDriveThru at gmail.com.
Well, you're laughing because I got gas now?
The way you said it humored me, yes. This was sent in by Stephen in Kildare, Ireland. On your most recent episode of The Experience, you mentioned that Vince McMahon, in his quest to kill the business twice over and move it away from wrestling, that he had accidentally created many Vince-isms. You have already touched on some of these before, such as medical facility and don't say belt and the like. Could you deep dive into that encyclopedia in that head of yours to cover as many of the Vince-isms and what they are/mean as you possibly can?
Oh, God. Well, everybody knows belt. You can't say belt. And wrestling has been banned, and wrestler for a while. One time I was actually doing commentary on one of the syndicated shows. We're doing the voiceover commentary of pre-taped matches at the studio in Stamford. And I remember it was Taka Michinoku, and JR and I were calling the match, and I said something to the effect of, well, Taka Michinoku better concentrate on doing something or he's not going to win this wrestling match. And JR started to say something, and Jennifer Good, the producer, said, stop. What? Can't say that. What'd we say? Can't say wrestling. I said, what? I didn't even realize what I'd said. I said, wait a minute. I can't say he's got better concentrate on winning this wrestling match? No. God damn it. And I hated to stop down because JR and I, for months in a row, would do 2 hours of television voiceovers I believe it was Thursday morning. We'd do Superstars for this country, and then we'd do International Heat. And everybody else that did those, they would stop down all the time and blah, blah, blah. And it'd take like 4 hours to do 2 one-hour shows, which are 45 minutes apiece without commercials. Well, JR and I did not like to stop down. We liked to do it like it was live. So we would see, and we would end up doing 2 one-hour shows in an hour and 45 minutes with a 15-minute break to re-rack tape in between. So I'm like, okay, well, I wasn't going to say sports entertainment, so I changed it to, better to win this contest or just to win this match or whatever. But it was little shit like that back when I was there. But now they actually have an entire handbook of phrases that you cannot use. And it's been out on the internet, and you can look it up. But like, that's how WWE Universe came about. Didn't want to call them fans. Can't say the fans. Now you can't say the referees' names, I'm told. You're not allowed to identify the referees. They are there on your screen, but they don't exist in real life because they don't have names. Sometimes he would get boiling mad. I would understand this. This is something I would pick apart in a wrestling training class. But Vince would hate it when a guy would be backed up into the corner and another guy would choke him around the neck and the guy, or be punching him in the face, and the guy's hands would be on the top rope. Right? You see a guy gets backed in the corner, he grabs it, it's nature, you grab the top rope on either side. But while you're being choked or punched in the face, Vince believed, and this is true, if it was real, you'd either try to be covering up your face or prying the fucking hands away. And that's true. And I would call that to everybody's attention in wrestling classes. But he would go on about it in meetings for fucking 5 or 10 minutes. Look at this fucking guy. You know, blah, blah, blah. Just certain things get under his skin. And over a period of time, they have now compiled all of those things. And so they give the announcers all these words. You've seen them. I can't even remember what else they've banned now, or suggested recommended verbiage for, but it's a whole goddamn list. And it's all about trying to remove phrases and terms that he thinks are wrestling, and he's done a pretty good job of removing all of the wrestling out of his wrestling program. But, and strap was worse than belt. He hated the word, drop the strap. That was a phrase in the industry. If you're going to switch your belt, Brian is going to beat Jim for the Southeastern title. He'd go, well, I'm going to drop the strap to you. Oh, he hated that. And it's things that in his mind make his program more associated with professional wrestling. Imagine that. And I was there that time in the meeting. There was Vince. There was Shane. This was before Stephanie. Shane's older, so Shane was around the office before Stephanie was, after he got out of school. Vince and Shane and myself and Bruce Pritchard and Shitstain and Kevin Dunn and Jim Ross and a variety of upper management folks that worked in the office. They were I can't remember what the subject of the meeting was called about, but Shane brought it up. He said, well, what should we call our superstars besides superstars? I said, how about wrestlers? They all look at me because I couldn't help it. And they'll look, no, should we call it, and I can't remember what his suggestions were, but it was basically everything but actors at that point. Entertainers came up and this and that. I said this, and I didn't give a fuck because that's why I couldn't wait to get out of there. And I mean, out of Connecticut and out of that whole fucking office, because I liked many of the people that worked there. And I liked the wrestling business still at that point in time, when it kind of still was the wrestling business. And I wanted to work hard and do good, but I would sit there and listen to these stupid arguments and stupid discussions of things that made no sense, where they would try to pretend to be something different than what they were. And Kevin Dunn, as another one, he didn't want you to say the word sport. He was offended when you drew analogies between that and real sports, because he was a baseball fan and a football fan. But I said they are wrestlers having wrestling matches, wearing wrestling boots and wrestling tights in a wrestling ring for a company called the World Wrestling Federation. So why the fuck would we not call them wrestlers? And then everybody ignores me and decides, well, should we call them entertainers, or should we go? It was maddening.
Did they recognize the fact that the general public didn't do that? I mean, to the average person who doesn't watch wrestling, they're wrestlers, and the show is wrestling.
Yes. No, they did not recognize that. They did not recognize. Kevin Dunn not only didn't recognize that, or wouldn't admit it out. That's probably why he's still there, because if you go along, and even if you don't believe something, if you say it out loud so that they can hear you say it and assume that you're on board with it, then you're okay. But if you question it, then well, he's not with the program. Well, guess what? I ain't with the fucking program. So you would actually hear them saying these phrases to each other. And that's the big problem I had with not a big problem, but just the problem I had with Bruce is that even when we were just speaking just ourselves, he wouldn't admit that this shit was bullshit and that we were calling stuff that was one thing by obviously another name. Because I guess they were afraid that Vince had the house bugged or whatever. But no, they did not recognize that nobody has ever said I can't wait to get my sports entertainment tickets. Or did you see the sports entertainment matches last night? Or I think I'll go to sports entertainment. And Kevin Dunn was the worst one because he would bring the studio employees in. And I mentioned this before, the documentaries that they do, the studio people and the technical folks and the producers and et cetera, the editors, they work very hard on those, and they don't even know that they're, in a lot of cases, that they're rewriting history. Some of them know, and they have no choice but to do so, but some of them don't even know. Back then, they didn't know a lot of things because they would have no wrestling background and be hired to come to work for Titan Television, and they would be educated on wrestling by Kevin Dunn. And, and he would say in production meetings when somebody was making a debut, Terry Funk, that famous time in Madison Square Garden where Terry Funk came out on Raw as Chainsaw Charlie, nobody's going to know Terry Funk in Madison Square Garden. He wasn't a big deal for us, and he hasn't been here in 10 years. I said, are you out of your mind? He's Terry Funk. Every wrestling fan in the world knows who Terry Funk is. It's not like he hasn't just been on fucking WCW a couple of years before and ECW just recently. And he was all over fucking TBS for years, and he was an NWA world champion. Everybody's going to know Terry. Well, we should do some kind of precondition. Nobody's going to know. Oh, God damn it. And of course, he went out and raised that chainsaw and did that fucking Terry sideways limp. And within 5 seconds, people were chanting, Terry, Terry, Terry. But Kevin Dunn would look at you dead seriously in the eye and say, any major superstar that was appearing for the first time for the WWF, we'd need to do a precondition or something because our fans are not wrestling fans and they're not going to know who he is.
Didn't he stop you at one point from, was it you mentioning the Dynamite Kid or you mentioning the Freebirds?
Oh, the Freebird. No, he didn't stop me. He said something about it afterwards. When they had the Brood, Edge, Christian, and Gangrel together. And I thought they looked great. The gimmick was good because they looked like the vampire guys that was hot at that time. And they were young, and I've always been a fan of Edge and Christian, and Gangrel was the veteran at that point, but he actually went and got the fangs. And so I'm putting him over on commentary. And I said something to the effect of, not since the fabulous Freebirds has 3 men like this made such an impact, or whatever the fuck, right? Kevin Dunn calls me over to the side later on at, I think next to TV, he'd heard the show. He said, don't come. And this was when Michael Hayes was working for the company, but he was Doc Hendricks then. He said, don't compare the Brood to the Freebirds. I said, what? He said, it would make them sound old. Nobody remembers the Freebirds. I said, if these guys draw a 10th of the money as the Freebirds did, we'd all be turning cartwheels down fucking Main Street in Stamford here. Are you out of your mind? And another time, I drew a comparison between, I don't know, somebody or other. And we were at a pay-per-view the next week. And in the production meeting, Kevin Dunn said, make sure it was Pete Rose was involved somehow. It was going up on that WrestleMania. And Kevin Dunn said, well, make sure to mention that last time Pete Rose was, I think, in Boston or wherever, he hit 47 home runs in a single game or whatever the fuck it was. Who gives a shit? And this is 1998. That was in 1973 or whatever. So I went up to him afterwards, over in a corner where nobody else could hear us. So, Kevin, I got to ask you this. I said, you just criticized me for drawing a comparison between one of our talents and somebody else from 15 years ago in the same sport. And I'm trying to make my point. He breaks it. He says, Corny, this is not a sport. I said, maybe not the way you fucking do it, but it is the way I fucking do it. And then I got hot and I finished the fucking question. I said, the point is, you blister me for comparing somebody from however long ago to somebody now that we've got in the same sport, in the same business, but yet you expect people to remember 25 years later that this fucking jack-off baseball player that's going to take his fucking Hall of Fame payoff, I wasn't saying this, but that's what he did, and go to the casino, that's why he's asking for it in cash. I said, you say that somebody is going to remember that 25 years ago, this fucking baseball player hit fucking however many home runs, and that's something that we're supposed to talk about on a wrestling program. What the fuck is the difference? We're trying to get our people over, not this fucking baseball player. And he just looked at, I said, you know what? Never mind. I said, never. And I just walked away from him because you couldn't even get through to the guy that what he was doing was basically contradictory to what he would say about the wrestling business. As long as it's a baseball player or a football player, give their entire goddamn background. But if it's a wrestler, well, nobody's going to remember that because that's years ago and they didn't wrestle for the WWF and our fans aren't wrestling fans. Well, guess what, Kevin Dunn? Now none of your fans are wrestling fans and you got a lot less fans than you used to.
I found a list of some of Vince's banned words.
There you go.
Belt, strap. Obviously, You just said it. It says here, we don't have belts or straps. We have championships, titles. The belt represents something. Well, it kind of defeats the purpose there.
Yeah.
Talk about what it represents. Hard work and dedication. Or it means accomplishment of goals, bullseye for others. Don't say the business or our industry.
And I'm with business. It should be sport. JR came up with industry. And now that JR's gone, they won't let you say industry. JR came up with industry because they didn't want him to say sport and he didn't like to say business. So he came up with industry or wrestling. They didn't want you to say wrestling. So he came up with industry. And I thought that worked because it's not offensively phony. But now they don't want you to say that.
And for the record, the sheet I'm looking at appears to be from, at a minimum, 2008, maybe 2009. Don't say feud. Don't say war. Don't say performance or performer or choreograph. Well, that seems like a natural one not to say.
Well, but wait a minute. Didn't they just say perform about 172 times on one of these shows last week?
I'm guessing Vince may have pulled back on that one. Don't say house show, use live event. Don't say backstage, use in the back or in the locker room area.
I like that.
Don't say pro wrestling or pro wrestler, use superstar, star, or athlete. Don't say international, use global. Jesus.
Oh, yeah. Hey, that's, I guess now that wrestling is back on TNT and back under the Turner family, do they get to say foreign object now? Is that out of fashion and still down there?
Was that a Jim Herd thing or a Turner?
That was a Turner thing. And the announcers started making fun of it because
it's ridiculous.
Ted Turner had decided in the interest of us all being one people that things shouldn't be foreign anymore. So he banned the word foreign from being said and it was a great sentiment, but he banned the word foreign from being said on the network. However, foreign in wrestling had another connotation such as foreign object. Well, they actually legitimately told the wrestling announcers that they couldn't say foreign object anymore. So the announcers started calling it an international object because it was so fucking stupid. And that's how that happened.
Don't say shot, as in no title shots.
Oh, I know that is why all these guys have this unwieldy verbiage where they say title opportunity, which sounds like dog shit. And remember the guy a couple weeks ago on Raw said, we're going to get a SmackDown tag team title match opportunity because he couldn't figure out it's a shot at the title. Take a shot at the brass ring, pal. He doesn't like that, though.
Don't say acrobatics. Don't say interesting. What's up with that? I don't understand that one.
I guarantee you that some way or another, somebody used the word interesting in a way that Vince didn't like, and Vince found something wrong with it, and it's one of those things that he doesn't like. I don't know about that one.
Don't say DQ. Don't say talent. Use star, superstar, or diva. Don't say me or I.
Wait a minute. DQ is another one of those wrestling terms that he doesn't like. Me or I is because he wants the announcers to speak for the fans. How would the fans? He wants them to represent what the fans feel instead of what they think.
Don't use inside terms like heel, babyface, blown up, shoot, rib, mark, etc. You could agree on that one.
I'd agree. Everything. Is blown up just a wrestling term?
I don't know.
Son of a bitch. Maybe, every once in a while, I've said I'm blown up to fucking people not in the wrestling business if I'm out of breath, and they kind of look at me like they don't really know what I'm talking about.
Yeah, maybe so then.
That may be a wrestling. I don't know what some of these, I've been around it so long, but some of these are, non-wrestling terms people wouldn't know. But yes, I agree with most of that.
Don't use U.S., say United States. This kind of shows the age of this one. This is before the universe. Don't say fans. When possible, refer to the audience as you. In other situations, ID them. Raw fans, our fans, Cena's fans, etc.
Now it's gone all the way to no fans.
Don't say hospital. Use medical center. Don't say faction. Use group. Please use now available instead of on sale. We never want to use the term the title is on the line. Please use more creative terms like the title will be defended. And then it has some recent additions as of 2008. A note from Vincent K. McMahon, less is more. Layout, make what you have to say more important and make the audience listen to you. Use rhetorical questions, then lay out. Let the audience digest the material. And then another note from Vince. Per Vince McMahon, going forward, we never want to use the term, the title is on the line. Please use more creative terms like the title will be defended.
He hates that.
And then another one is a note from Big, per Vincent K. McMahon.
Oh, God, that's when he was there.
Please do not use the term sports entertainment. Going forward, please use entertainment in its place.
So just take the sports completely out. That's another Big. John Gaborick, right? He was the guy on Tough Enough. Do you know that not only did fans think he was an ex-wrestler, but I found out when I went down there to do the week of TNA tapings for Jeff Jarrett in 2017, right? Summertime, because it was hot, even for Florida. So it must have been August-ish. He was working for him at that time because he had been let go from the WWF. And some of the wrestlers thought that he had been a wrestler. That's why they were listening to him. I didn't have any problem with the guy, but I knew he was a friend of Kevin Dunn, so I knew he was a jughead. But that's what it was. He was a television production guy that was a friend of Kevin Dunn's that was out of work, and they brought him in and gave him a spot on Tough Enough and put with him with that big head. When they put him out there, people thought that he was some kind of ex-wrestler or wrestling personality because he was grading the Tough Enough guys, right? You remember him.
Yeah.
And I said, no. I said, he's never had anything to do with wrestling besides being on that show because he worked in the production company at Titan TV because he was friends with Kevin Dunn from Baltimore. And they, what? That explains a lot. Then they realized, what the fuck? Like I said, I didn't have a problem with him, but it's just that he was speaking to guys and they were listening like he was a sage, fucking wrestling coach. And so the only cross thing I had, and I just ignored it, was at that TNA taping was they wanted to have, who the fuck was it? John Morrison was there, and he was Johnny Impact then. And whoever the heel was that was working with him, could it have been Eli Drake? Might have been. I can't remember. they wanted to have him come in the ring and jump John and just beat him up. And Johnny had just won a match, and plus every other match was in and in a beatdown. I said, if you really want to lay him out and fucking make an impact, make it different from all this other shit, let's break the board over his head. They said, what? I said, yeah. So I got the board and I fixed it. I ran him to the Home Depot and got the shit and fixed the board, ran through with the guys because I'm helping produce the stuff. And right as we're about to go out, Big says, you can't do that. So what are you talking about? No chair shots and no head shots. I said, I fixed the board. No, we can't do it. We can't do it. I said, it's already, and I had gone to Jeff and made this change, right? Jeff Jarrett had approved this. I said, here's what we're going to do. And he comes in, boom, boom, boom. Oh, that's better. That's good. Do that. And he'd even helped show the heel how to fucking swing the board and not to fucking hold back, because you have to commit to that swing or it won't work and you will hurt the guy. I said, I cleared it with Jeff. He said, it doesn't matter. Now he's got heat with me because Jeff has come in to take this fucking company over again and try to get it back in fucking some state of affairs. And I'm there for Jeff, and he's trying to overrule Jeff on something we're about to go do. I said, well, I got news for you. This is what we're going to fucking do. And he sat back down. So the heel comes in. I'm interviewing Morrison. The heel comes in. He turns around. I duck. He breaks the board over his head. The thing flies into a million pieces. The people fucking pop. Johnny goes down. The fucking heel standing over him. I'm checking on John, taking his pulse. And Johnny opens one eye and looks up at me and smiles and says, good call on the board, Corny. Because he didn't want to take another one of those giant fucking bumps. And it didn't hurt him because it was fixed. And the fucking goof thought we were really going to break something over the fucking guy's head. No, chair shots to the head are barred. Well, this is wrestling, motherfuckers. Sit back and let the professionals drive, and you just look at the fucking monitor. But we're outnumbered now. They all come from these environments. They come from the environment where you get paid to train and go to school to learn how to become a wrestler, or you get hired to write wrestling despite having never been in a locker room before, much less actually inside the railing. I was there when Shit Stains gave me that immortal line. We'd gone to do on cameras for some fucking, he was doing commentary on the New York show, right? You remember that when they had WWF New York on WOR or something late at night, and they got Shit Stain to do the color. My ex-wife one time accidentally watched it. She said, I can't understand a word he's fucking saying. I said, it only shows in New York. They'll get it. Nobody else would. But anyway, we're coming back up the fucking ramp after the on cameras were taped. He said, that was so cool. I said, what? He said, I've never been inside the railing while a match was going on before. This was the guy that was writing the fucking show. So that's what we got now after 20 years. That's all of them. All the writers, they were going through the men's locker room to be whistling Stranger in Paradise. A lot of the wrestlers think that it's normal to get paid to go to school and learn your fucking craft. And the ones that don't, the ones that are out there starving on the independents, well, they're starving because most of these companies are booking the Invisible Man and JoJo the Dog-Faced Boy. And they think that crowd thinks that it's okay to laugh and make fun of the business, and they're shocked at wrestlers or wrestling fans that take it seriously. So we're all pretty much outnumbered here these days.
I see some quotes here from a Chris Jericho interview that he did at some point in the last few years. And doesn't seem to be about something on camera. It seems to be about actually talking to Vince. Was it like this with you, that you weren't allowed to use, or you couldn't use the word job? Instead, Vince would insist that you use the word favor? Someone didn't job for you, they did a favor for you?
Well, yes and no. I can see Vince doing that with the talent. I started to say I can see him, and then I'm hearing pronouns, pal. That's another thing. He doesn't want you to say, look, he drop-kicked him. He wants you to say, Brian drop-kicked Jim, because he said he drop-kicked him. Doesn't mean anything. Too many. Use pronouns, pal. That's something you can agree with, too. But if we're sitting around saying, can we get fucking Bret to do a job for Shawn, he didn't mind the word job. But when he was there conveying to the top talent all the reasons why that they should be defeated in that match, he didn't want to call it a job. He wanted to call it a favor. So there's two different environments there. In a booking meeting, you can job all day long because none of you in that meeting are doing the job. But when he's talking somebody into doing the job, it becomes a fable.
One last thing about this. When The Rock started using the line, the most electrifying man in sports entertainment, was that written for him, or was that something he started using the word sports entertainer there? Was that something he had decided to do?
I think he was there for that because Rocky came in right as it was all changing, and he was going to get with the fucking curve, especially when he got that second lease on life after Die Rocky Die, when they'd pushed him as that kid and play fucking babyface. So he knew that you weren't supposed to say wrestling, so he was taking that upon himself. He was still going to be the most electrifying man in whatever the fuck he was in. So, and I don't blame him for doing that. Because if he'd have said one time, I'm the most electrifying man in professional wrestling, they wouldn't let him say it anymore. But because he said, I'm the most electrifying man in sports entertainment, they let him say it all the time, and he got it over.
All right, well, that was a long answer. Let's get some more questions before we wrap things up.
I wish it'd been a better question. No, I'm kidding. I'm just kidding.
This was sent in to CornyDriveThru@gmail.com from Rob Arrowwood in Evansville, Wyoming. Chris Jericho said on his recent interview with Matt Hardy, quote, "There is no AEW booker. We are all the bookers. We are all doing it together." What are your thoughts on this?
Well, yes and no. Yes, I like it. No, I don't. You always have to have a booker, somebody with the final say that is not only more experienced, but also more physically intimidating than anybody, or if not physically intimidating, more intimidating in terms of personality than everybody else on the fucking roster. The guy that you go to, Dusty Rhodes, Cowboy Bill Watts, Eddie Graham. The guy that can, tell you whether you're going to go up or down, whether you're going to live or die, whether you're going to stay or go, whatever the fuck. The final word, the guy that your general. All of us would follow Dusty Rhodes into combat because he was the biggest fucking star in the world. Then he was the biggest box office attraction, and he'd been there and done that, and he had more experience than all of us. And luckily we had two leaders. We had Dusty and Flair in those days, and the Crockett days. You always want input from your top talent if they're experienced and have drawn money. That's the way the wrestling business was built. It wasn't just about the booker telling everybody exactly what to do and what finish to do and what every move to make. It was the booker assembling a team of guys that he knew could carry the ball. And some of them were just the fucking, the opening match guys where your fucking guys on the line just block for me. I'm the quarterback, block for me. And some guys were the guys that made the intricate plays, the main event stars. And the main event guys, you ask, who do you like to work with? Who would you want to bring in here? Have you done angles in other territories? That's the way the business went. A big star came in a territory getting a push. First thing he'd do is tell the booker, well, I did this angle in Amarillo with so-and-so, and boy, you got a baby face here. It'd be perfect for me to do that. Here's how it goes. How many guys do you think jumped off a ladder on Pepper Gomez's stomach over his career? Millions. How many? The Kentuckians, Grizzly Smith and Luke Brown, they would trade territories back and forth with the Assassins because that's why they had a program. It was so long. They drew so much money. Because whatever team went into a territory first, they'd get over, and then they'd say, well, we did these angles with the other team, and bring them in, and we'll draw money, and they'd do that. George Scott, when he booked the Carolinas for Crockett in the 70s and early 80s, his main talent as a booker, it became more apparent after I met the fucking guy, was he brought in Wahoo McDaniel and Blackjack Mulligan and Johnny Valentine and all these guys that would basically book their shit for him. Wahoo McDaniel said, hey, there's a kid you need to bring in from Minneapolis. He's going to be nothing but money. His name's Ric Flair. I'll work with him. There you go. But those guys knew how they could get over and how they could get other people over and what angles worked for them. And everybody had their specialty match. Wahoo'd bring in a guy that was good at the Indian strap match. Or the other, Terry Funk want to work with a guy who could have a good Texas death match, whatever the fuck. But you always have to have an authority figure and one guy that's more important than everybody else to say yes or no to everything and put everything on paper, because it was all just done by talking back then. One guy puts everything on paper. One guy sets it in stone. One guy says, this is the card. And in the case of the AEW talent, that's fine for Chris Jericho. He's done a great job because he's got 25 years experience and he knows what gets over and he knows what gets other people over. But when you've got guys that have only done the independents, that's go back to the start of this thing. I knew that AEW wrestling was not going to be something I was going to want to be involved with when I heard that the Young Bucks were going to be and Kenny Olivier were going to be instrumental in it. I would jump at the chance to work at a promotion with Chris Jericho funded by a billionaire. Not regularly, because I still ain't going to fly, but yes, I'd be glad to help in whatever way possible. But when you hear about this, I knew. Then you have a bunch of guys who have never had any constraints put on them because these outlaw promoters let the guys do whatever they want. That's why you have all these joke bullshit matches on these independent shows with the dolls and the invisible men and the fucking children and the fucking goofiness. And I knew that that was going to play a part in AEW. And when you have guys like Chris Jericho, who's an old veteran who knows what he's doing, or a guy like Cody who has booking and promotion in his genes on one side, and you got two little fucking kids who think it's, fun because their idea of they were never trained and their wrestling formulation came in a fucking barn in California where everybody just does all the moves they've ever known and tries to have the 5-star matches and in front of 400 people, and that's their idea of what wrestling is. Or a fucking pretentious twat douchebag who thinks that Japanese anime is going to be the next fucking hottest thing in America. You got them on the other side. If you've got all those people doing it, then it comes out like it was fucking edited in a Mixmaster, which is what a lot of the start of All Elite Wrestling for the first 6 months looked like. You'd have a serious match between Cody and Dustin with blood and psychology and passion and a story, and then you'd have the legless guy fucking around with the fucking, dragster from the Tropicana, while, untrained outlaw guys did stupid shit that missed by 6 feet. That's what you've got when there is no booker and everybody's doing their own shit. There needs to be a happy medium of a guy to tell everybody what to fucking do when he has to, and a guy who asks his main event guys with experience that know what's going on for help in putting their shit together. And everybody then down the rest of the card gets told what to do or told where the door is if they don't like it, and they hope to get to that main event spot where they can start pitching in. That's the way it works.
AEW is kind of like the Montessori school of professional wrestling.
Only because you're a privileged child did you come up with that, and only because apparently I am too did I get it.
Well, there you go. A few more questions this week, Jim. This next one, sent in to CornyDriveThru@gmail.com from Jesse D. in St. Louis. Can you please tell us all there is to know about the white hat fedora you wore during your time at Jim Crockett Promotions?
Oh, my God.
Did you have more than one? Because the one you're wearing looks like it's swallowing your head. How long did you wear it? Will it make a return for us hardcore fans?
Well, Dusty Rhodes, it was 1986, and I'm going to say it was probably sometime in May, because Dusty wanted to start promoting the Great American Bashes. And that was the first year of the Bashes when we did those big stadiums and blah, blah, blah. And one of the things that he wanted to do was he decided to, now there's a heel color commentator on every program, or for quite a while there was on every program, and now there's still on a lot of the programs, there's a heel color guy, right? For a while it became just everywhere. Well, Dusty wanted to put me on color. But he didn't just put me on color. He put me on all the colors. every time we did syndicated TV, I was going to do color. And on some of the TBS shows too, because that summer we taped some of the TBS shows in the arenas, right, on the Bash Tour or whatever. But at minimum, it was both NWA Worldwide and NWA Pro. Those were the two syndicated TVs that were on the broadcast stations in the various markets around the country. And actually, those were more important to us at the time than the TBS show, because those are the ones where the local promos played and we actually sold tickets in the live. TBS was great for making stars across the country, but you couldn't just promote Kansas City off TBS. You had to have TV in Kansas City. And that's where the local promos played and everything. And I'd never done color before. I'd sat in a couple of times in Mid-South with just to do a segment, right? I'd never done the whole show. And that's before Jim Ross had come to the NWA. So, I mean, not that Tony and David didn't try to tell me anything, but they were not announcing professors like Jim Ross was. Say, okay, this is the role of the play-by-play guy. This is the role of the color guy. He used to say, imagine it's football. When the ball is snapped while it's in play, I'm calling it. But then when the play is over with, then you're the color man. So you will analyze what happened and talk about the effect of it. Well, of course, the football analogy was lost on me because I hadn't seen any more football then than I have now, but I got the fucking gist of it when he explained it like that. But I just went out to be an annoying heel manager on color and take up for the heels and knock the baby faces. So I was not doing good as a color commentator on those shows, but I sure was getting some fucking heat because I was just running my mouth now for the whole fucking hour, right? And Dusty said, with me out there with Big Bubba, he wanted to make my Louisville Slugger interview segment and the whole thing like that. For some reason, he thought Kentucky was full of Southern plantations. I think he had Kentucky where Mississippi was. I said, really, Kentucky in the Civil War, we sympathized with the South. We never seceded, just in case. We kind of picked the winner. But Louisville is more of a Midwestern city than it is deep South. But nevertheless, he had the wicker chair. He had in the early days until like Klondike Bill or whoever loaded the truck forgot to start bringing shit. I'd have a little table sitting next to my wicker chair, like I'm sitting out on the veranda of the plantation. I'd have a big pitcher of iced sweet tea next to me. I said, Bubba, pour me the sweet tea. And I started wearing the fucking flower in the boutonniere and I just went to the store and I got some more colorful shit. And sometimes I wouldn't wear a tie. I'd wear a fucking, like that, what's that old design paisley, shirt, a multicolored shirt. And I saw that hat one day. I said, I don't know if people down south wear these things, but it looks like they oughta. And I just got the fucking hat and I wore that. I was just, being different, doing what Dusty wanted me to do. I was standing out. And for May, June, and July, 3 months on both those syndicated shows and a number of TBS shows, I was on for the whole fucking hour, either doing commentary and still I would do commentary and then I would introduce my men and manage them and then come back to the announce desk. It was goddamn work. And most of those buildings, we were doing those syndicated TVs in high school and college gyms in North and South Carolina around Charlotte within a 2-hour drive for the Nemo truck. And they were all selling out. Be 1,500, 2,000 people crammed in with those TV lights. It was 150 degrees in there. Anybody that's ever been to the old Spartanburg Memorial Auditorium in the summertime when they do TV or in some of the, the as I said, school gyms around, but they were all sometimes they were selling out in advance. We were so hot at that point. So the local sponsors would literally try to jam as many people as they possibly could in these buildings. And that's why when you look at the heels and baby faces coming to the ring, there's no aisleway. You're just walking through the fucking people most of the time. Or they had a rope stretched from the door to the fucking railing around the ring. And you'd have a 3-foot wide aisleway to come down and the cops would be in front of you and behind you. They were jammed. But it was such an atmosphere, that you couldn't replicate that, and everybody was into everything. But that's why I was on TV looking like a cross between Foghorn Leghorn and fucking Jed Clampett Because Dusty wanted me to be like I just came off the Southern Plantation in Louisville with the sweet tea.
How helpful is it to get great crowd reactions to have a hot room as opposed to a cold room?
Oh, you mean temperature-wise?
Yeah.
Well, there's like everything else. There's limits. In a cold room, like I used to talk about Raleigh, Dorton Arena, that historic building out there at the fairgrounds with all the windows, right? Well, in the summertime, it was 100 and something degrees, and in the wintertime, it was 40. And so you wanted the happy medium because when people are so cold, like that one time, the Ring of Honor taping we had to do in Bell Vernon, Pennsylvania, where I finally cracked up that night when it literally was so cold in the building, sitting on an ice floor that they couldn't turn the heat on or they'd melt the skating ice, that the fans never took their coats off, and some of them still even had their gloves on. And the guys, when they'd have a hard enough match, after the match, their shoulders were steaming like the bald-headed football players in Green Bay, right? It was only 40-something degrees in the building. That was hindering the crowd. They were trying, but they couldn't clap with gloves on. It said clunk, clunk, and they were fucking shivering. But if it gets to be 110, 120 degrees, I've been in plenty of fucking wrestling buildings like that. The fans want to like it, but toward the end of the show, they're fucking starting to suffer from heat prostration. I was at a show in Bowling Green, Kentucky one time that was so hot at the National Guard Armory. I was doing the ring announcing, and the place was oversold, and it would only hold 1,000 people supposedly, but they got 1,200 in it. And it was so fucking hot that people that didn't have a seat were waiting until the people in the front row kind of keeled over or just couldn't take it anymore, and they'd leave and they'd come in and jump in their chair. If it's so hot that the people are worried about their own they're getting dizzy, then they can't fully invest in the wrestling matches. So I would say between 75 and 95 is the perfect temperature for a wrestling building. Anything colder kind of takes the edge off, and anything hotter, you're asking the people to fucking put their health in danger to get too wild and crazy.
Well, our final question this week, Jim, and we have so many questions we may have to do something with all the questions we don't get to for Patreon or something, because they keep coming in more than ever before, and people keep sending them in over and over because they're upset that their question doesn't get picked. Because
and
so
where's Charlie? Where's Charlie from Starkville this week?
I have plenty of Charlie questions here.
I'm sure you do.
He sends in a lot. But this final one was sent in on Twitter using the hashtag CornyDriveThru from GMatt. When you were doing ringside photography back in the day, did the flash ever bother the wrestlers, managers, or referees?
No. Good God. If there'd have been 100 of us around ringside, it might have been an issue, but everybody at that point was just glad they were either going to get pictures they could sell at the gimmick table or get their picture in the fucking magazine or program. A couple of Bill Apter used to do a spot where he, when he was, because he was traveling around the country, going to different matches in different territories, people weren't seeing him every week in all the same buildings. So he would have the heels do a spot where they would try to chase him or whatever, and he would hold his camera up and fire the flash off in their eye, and then he'd run off and they'd be blinded or whatever. And they were doing it so Bill would put their picture in a magazine. But no, every once in a while, you would have Cowboy Frankie Lane actually complain to me one time. He was like, "You were taking pictures, when the guy was kicking my ass." This is before I was officially smart, so he was beating around the bush instead of when I was selling. He was saying, "When the guy was kicking my ass, you're taking pictures. Don't send those to the magazine." There were actually some guys that were goofy enough, maybe like a Braun Strowman-like type, that were goofy enough that they didn't want you to send pictures of them to the magazine unless they were on offense. And they didn't understand that if it worked that way for everybody, half of the people in the business would never get their picture in a magazine. But normally, no. Every once in a while, some old man in the front row would go, "Hey, picture boy, get out of the way, I can't see." I'm like, "Hey, I'm working here. I'm on my fucking knees." I never could understand those photographers you'd see in other territories that just walked around the ring and stood up straight and just stood up and walked around it. If they'd have done that in the Tennessee territory, they'd have got a fucking ice ball to the back of the head. I always ducked down on my knees and popped my head right up over the apron, shot under the bottom rope, so I wasn't in anybody's way. But I've made a career out of getting in people's way ever since then.
That's right.
Anyway.
On that note.
Let's end on that note. Let's just do it. Let's do it.
Well, I'm going to give a couple plugs here at the end, of course.
Well, go ahead.
Follow Jim on Twitter at the Jim Cornette.
Yes.
Follow me on Twitter at Great Brian Last.
If you have to.
You can hear me on the 605 Super Podcast, 605pod.com, available wherever you find your favorite podcasts.
If you really get bored.
Don't forget, they have plenty of time right now. Don't forget the official Jim Cornette YouTube channel, tinyurl.com/official Corny YouTube, or just go to YouTube and search for Jim and Cornette. It'll be the first thing that pops up. We are marching towards 100,000 subscribers. Be a part of the gang, the official Jim Cornette YouTube channel. We are now on Patreon. Join today. The first tier is up. For $5 a month, you get access to the archives with another batch of shows going up each and every week. As we're recording, another batch of shows goes up tonight. Patreon.com/Cornette. With a lot more content to come. Those of you who want more Jim Cornette, you're about to get that and more.
And who doesn't? Who doesn't want more of me?
Patreon.com/Cornette. Of course, the drive-thru is brought to you by the law
Who
office.
doesn't want a /Cornette?
Well, if you do, maybe you need an attorney. Call the law office of Stephen P. New, 888-692-8084. Get even with Stephen at newlawoffice.com. Don't forget the Jim Cornette Experience debuts this Friday and is available wherever you find your favorite podcasts along with the drive-thru, or you can always go to the official Jim Cornette YouTube channel for full shows, clips of shows, and omnibus collections. And don't forget JimCornette.com. The previous plug was in the middle of a question. This time we're going to do it right. JimCornette.com and Cornette's Collectibles action figures, which you may only have a limited time to get a hold of. Burger towels, t-shirts, autograph photos, books, DVDs, restraining orders, and somehow there's always more. JimCornette.com. But until
always more. And by the way, I am shipping, as I mentioned, a mile away from the house, putting on the gloves, got the disinfectant, the Purell stuff. I always keep that, so I had it before it sold out. Spraying myself down with Lysol before I go in, and when I come out, going to my lovely and young and healthy and vibrant clerk, keeping 6 feet distance away from me and everybody else, including your packages. Everybody stays at least 6 feet away from your packages. And I'll be shipping twice a week until the crisis is abated so that you can get your classic wrestling material to read and to watch, to have something to do.
Once again, JimCornette.com. But
you don't even talk about what a sacrifice I'm making going out in public twice a week and seeing almost no one and having contact with almost no one.
Sounds like
just for the cult of Cornette's pleasure. It's actually, yeah, I think Lance Storm even tweeted that. He was like, well, yeah, I'm staying at home. I'm reading a book and playing with my dogs. This is kind of like what I thought I'd do whenever I won the lottery.
Well, on that note, you can hear us Friday on The Experience. But until then, for Jim Cornette, I'm the Great Brian Last. Stay safe, stay home. Tally ho!